The Senate hearing room grew tense and quiet as Senator Cory Booker leaned toward his microphone, his typically warm expression replaced by a sharp, scrutinizing gaze aimed at the young woman seated before him. Karoline Leavitt, the 27-year-old White House press secretary, sat poised in a crisp navy blue suit, her hands neatly folded on the table as the weight of the moment pressed down on the chamber. "Miss Leavitt," Booker began, his voice firm with the authority of his years in the Senate and as a former presidential contender, "you've presented several assertions about the administration's border policy that contradict verified data. So I have to ask, are you intentionally misleading the American people, or are you simply echoing what you've been instructed to say?" His words cut through the stillness, sparking a visible ripple of discomfort among committee members. All eyes and cameras turned toward Leavitt, capturing her reaction in the charged silence that followed. The Senate oversight hearing was being broadcast live across every major news outlet, with millions of viewers tuned in, waiting to see how the young White House press secretary would respond to one of the Democratic Party's most formidable voices. What followed left both the room and the nation stunned. Maintaining unflinching eye contact with Senator Cory Booker, Karoline Leavitt calmly opened her portfolio and retrieved a document no one expected her to have. The tension escalated instantly. Within moments, the confident composure that had defined Booker's tone shifted. His expression, once steady and assured, gave way to unease as he realized what Leavitt was about to unveil, an unexpected move that would radically alter the course of the hearing and momentarily silence one of the Senate's most revered speakers. But before we break down this extraordinary exchange that has Washington buzzing, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more high-stakes political showdowns transforming America's political dialogue. Senator Cory Booker, long respected as one of the Democratic Party's most eloquent and intellectually formidable figures, had built a national profile as a powerful orator and policy expert. A former mayor of Newark and a one-time presidential contender, Booker's resume boasted degrees from Stanford, Oxford, and Yale Law School. In hearings, he often dominated with a mix of emotional appeal and policy precision. Lately, he had been an outspoken critic of what he described as dangerous misinformation flowing from the White House regarding immigration and border security. But on this day, in this hearing, Karoline Leavitt was about to challenge that narrative in a way no one had anticipated. In televised interviews and a flurry of social media posts, Senator Cory Booker had been relentless in his criticism of the administration, singling out White House Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt for what he described as blatant distortions of the truth. His direct confrontations had set the stage for a political clash watched closely by both allies and adversaries. Karoline Leavitt represented a bold shift in American politics. At just 27 years old, she had become the youngest White House press secretary in U.S. history, appointed by President Trump after his return to office. Previously serving as an assistant press secretary during Trump's first term and later as communications director for Congresswoman Elise Stefanik, Leavitt quickly earned a reputation as a sharp, unwavering voice for the administration. While critics labeled her as inexperienced and out of her depth, her supporters praised her fierce loyalty, rapid-fire command of messaging, and her ability to stay composed under pressure, especially in front of a press corps that often sought to rattle her. Hailing from New Hampshire and a graduate of St. Anselm College, Leavitt had already endured several political firestorms that would have tested even seasoned veterans. The high-stakes Senate Oversight Committee hearing had been convened to investigate the administration's claims about border security. At the heart of the matter were reports suggesting that recent policy shifts had significantly reduced illegal crossings and crime in border communities, claims that many Democrats, including Booker, accused the administration of fabricating through selective or misleading use of data. The political stakes could not have been higher. Immigration remained one of the most polarizing issues in the country, and public sentiment surrounding this hearing could sway congressional approval for the administration's hotly contested border security funding proposal. If Senator Booker succeeded in discrediting Karoline Leavitt's statements, it could unravel the White House's carefully constructed narrative on border security. For Leavitt, the hearing posed both a daunting challenge and a rare opportunity. Holding her own against one of the Senate's most skilled interrogators could elevate her image from mere mouthpiece to serious political contender. But faltering in such a high-profile setting would only reinforce the criticism that she lacked the depth to defend administration policies beyond rehearsed soundbites. "This isn't just political theater," a CNN commentator remarked before the hearing began. "Booker has been preparing meticulously, assembling hard data that directly contradicts the administration's claims. Leavitt is walking straight into a well-laid trap." What few expected, however, was that Leavitt had done extensive preparation of her own research that would soon flip the narrative and turn Booker's anticipated takedown into something entirely unexpected. "Miss Leavitt," Booker began, his tone controlled yet unmistakably firm, "last week you publicly claimed that border apprehensions have decreased by 57% under the administration's new policies. However," he continued, raising a document stamped with the Department of Homeland Security's seal, "internal DHS reports indicate only a 12% decline. How do you explain this clear discrepancy?" Several Democratic senators leaned in, nodding in approval at what appeared to be a decisive blow. The cameras zoomed in. The tension spiked. "Senator Booker, thank you for the question," she began, her tone steady. "The 57% figure I referenced pertains specifically to Sector B7, the first region where our new strategic protocols were deployed. The 12% figure in the DHS report reflects a nationwide average prior to full implementation." Booker leaned in, undeterred. "That's not how you presented it to the American public. You claimed a nationwide reduction, without any such qualification." "With respect, Senator," Leavitt responded, "if you consult the full transcript of that press briefing, you'll see I clearly noted these were early results from pilot implementation areas." The context was unambiguous. A low murmur rippled through the chamber. Leavitt was proving to be far more prepared and precise than many had anticipated. Senator Alex Padilla of California quickly followed up. "Even accepting your clarification, Ms. Leavitt, independent analyses from 3 university research centers dispute even the 12% figure. Are you familiar with the Stanford Border Policy Initiative report?" "I am, Senator," Leavitt answered confidently. "That report was based on preliminary data from January. Our figures include updated statistics from February and March, which weren't available at the time Stanford published their findings." What followed was nearly 30 minutes of rigorous questioning, with Democratic senators taking turns challenging Leavitt's assertions on border security, drug interdiction, and migrant processing. Throughout the exchange, Leavitt remained composed, answering each inquiry with specificity, never appearing rattled. Republican senators occasionally interjected, providing her opportunities to expand on policy details and emphasize the administration's broader strategy. The tension escalated when Senator Elizabeth Warren took the floor. "Miss Leavitt," Warren began, "this pattern of selective statistics is deeply concerning. You've touted a 40% decrease in drug seizures as a success, when in fact, fewer seizures could indicate that more drugs are slipping through undetected. Isn't that fundamentally misleading?" Leavitt responded without hesitation. "Senator Warren, drug interdiction is measured through multiple indicators: confidential informant reports, fluctuations in street prices, and interdiction efficiency, among others. All of these metrics point to a real decrease in overall flow, not just seizures." Warren, slightly caught off guard by the depth of the reply, pressed again. "Yet career officials at the DEA have drawn different conclusions. How do you explain that discrepancy?" "The DEA report you're referencing uses a narrower methodology that doesn't account for the multivariate indicators in our model," Leavitt said. "I'd be happy to provide the committee with our full analytical framework for review." As the exchange intensified, Senator Raphael Warnock turned the conversation toward humanitarian conditions at border processing centers, adding a new layer of scrutiny to the already charged hearing. Senator Tim Kaine raised challenges over the administration's reported deportation statistics, but throughout the continued questioning, Karoline Leavitt remained unshaken. With each inquiry, she responded with precise data points and policy clarifications, demonstrating a level of subject matter expertise that exceeded expectations. Then, Senator Cory Booker spoke again. The New Jersey senator, who had been quietly observing while taking meticulous notes, now leaned in with renewed intensity. As one of the committee's most effective interrogators, it was clear he had been holding back his most forceful critique for this exact moment. "Ms. Leavitt," he began, his tone sharper than before, "you've managed these questions skillfully. But at the end of the day, your public statements still contradict the internal data and assessments provided by career officials across multiple agencies. This isn't a disagreement over interpretation, it's a matter of truthfulness to the American people." He held up a folder. Inside are sworn statements from 5 senior DHS officials who allege they were pressured to alter data to fit a pre-approved political narrative. "What do you say to these career public servants who've risked their reputations to speak out?" A charged silence swept through the chamber. The moment had arrived, the one many had anticipated as a turning point. Several Democratic senators leaned forward, awaiting Leavitt's reaction. Leavitt calmly took a sip of water, then opened her portfolio. "Senator Booker," she said evenly, "I'm aware of those testimonials. In fact, I expected you might raise them today." She drew out a document and held it up. "What I have here," she continued, "is a series of email communications between your office and those 5 DHS officials, sent in the 2 weeks leading up to their testimonies." Booker's expression flickered, briefly. "These emails, obtained through a formal FOIA request, include direct suggestions from your staff about how the data should be framed in their statements. In fact, specific language was proposed to emphasize data manipulation as a theme." A wave of murmurs rippled through the chamber. Republican members straightened in their seats. "That's a serious charge, Miss Leavitt," said Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina. "Do you have those emails on hand?" "I do, Senator," Leavitt replied, pulling out a thicker folder. "I've brought printed copies for each member of the committee." She handed the documents to an aide, who began distributing them. "You'll see highlighted excerpts where Senator Booker's chief legislative aide wrote, and I quote, 'The language about data manipulation needs to be stronger to make the necessary impact during hearings.'" Booker remained composed, but those watching closely noticed the tightening of his jaw. Leavitt continued. "There's also a text exchange between Senator Booker and DHS Regional Director Hayes, in which the senator states, and I quote again, 'Your testimony needs to focus on policy disagreements framed as data manipulation.' That's what will get media traction." Now, the room had fallen utterly silent. Several senators were already flipping through the documents, reading the highlighted passages with furrowed brows. "Hold on a second," Booker interjected, regaining his voice. "You're taking routine discussions with concerned whistleblowers and twisting them into something they're not." "With respect, Senator," Leavitt replied firmly, "the documents speak for themselves. The timestamps and full message chains clearly demonstrate that your office initiated contact with these officials, not the other way around," Karoline Leavitt said, her tone calm but assertive. "And the content of those exchanges reveals clear guidance on how they should present their experiences, not simply responses to concerns they independently raised." She then turned her attention to the committee chairman. "Mr. Chairman, I've also submitted documentation showing that these same officials met with 3 media outlets prior to filing their formal whistleblower complaints, meetings that were arranged by Senator Booker's communications director." Senator Chuck Grassley, the committee's most senior Republican, adjusted his glasses as he reviewed the documents. "These appear to be legitimate communications," he remarked. "Senator Booker, would you like to respond?" Known for his composure even under pressure, Booker took a breath. "These selective emails are being presented without the broader context," he said. "Our office frequently engages with government officials as part of our oversight role. That's standard Senate practice." Leavitt nodded slightly, but stood firm. "Senator, if you refer to page 7, you'll find the full message chains. These weren't whistleblowers coming forward independently. These were politically affiliated officials who were approached, because, as your aide put it, they could be convinced to provide the narrative we need. Senator Josh Hawley of Missouri jumped in. Ms. Leavitt, are you implying that these so-called whistleblower statements were not organic, but part of a politically coordinated effort? I'm not implying anything, Senator, Leavitt replied. I'm presenting documentation that strongly suggests these testimonials were orchestrated, not independently generated. That distinction matters, especially when those statements are being used to challenge official policy data. Then, she delivered the most explosive point of the hearing. Most concerning, she said, raising another document, on page 12, you'll find evidence that 2 of these officials were offered future job opportunities in exchange for their cooperation. That raises serious ethical, and potentially legal, questions. The revelation hit the room like a thunderclap. Several journalists hurried out of the chamber, no doubt racing to break the story. Booker, aware of how damaging the moment had become, tried to regain control. Ms. Leavitt, you've clearly come here with a rehearsed political ambush designed to deflect from legitimate concerns about your administration's policies. This may play well on cable news, but it doesn't answer the core questions about data manipulation. But Leavitt refused to be baited. Senator, she replied evenly, I've responded to every policy inquiry with detailed data and documentation. What I've provided here is relevant background on the origin of the claims you introduced into this hearing. The American people deserve to know whether so-called independent testimony has, in fact, been politically manufactured. At that moment, Senator Ted Cruz seized the opening. Mr. Chairman, Cruz said, his voice cutting through the tension, in light of these serious allegations and the supporting evidence, I move that we suspend further questioning of Ms. Leavitt and immediately convene an ethics inquiry into the coordination of testimony presented to this committee. Democratic senators erupted in protest while Republicans voiced vocal support, plunging the chamber into disorder. The chairman struggled to restore decorum amid the escalating chaos. At the center of it all, Karoline Leavitt sat unmoved, composed, calm, and quietly taking notes as the political storm she had ignited unfolded around her. When order was finally restored, Leavitt turned back to Senator Booker and addressed him directly. Senator, she began, her voice clear and steady, I came here prepared to engage in a good-faith discussion on our differences in border security policy. I still welcome that exchange. But I also came ready to defend not just the administration's integrity, but my own. The American people deserve better than political theater dressed up as oversight. Delivered without a trace of anger, her words carried the force of conviction. Booker, usually quick on his feet, found himself momentarily silent, a rare pause for the seasoned orator. Seizing the moment, Senator Marsha Blackburn of Tennessee leaned forward. Ms. Leavitt, while my Democratic colleagues collect themselves, perhaps you could walk us through the actual border security data your office has compiled. Thank you, Senator, Leavitt replied with a nod. I've prepared a full presentation with sourced data and transparent methodology that directly addresses the concerns raised here today. As she methodically presented the figures, detailing everything from sector-specific apprehension trends to interdiction metrics, many in the room noted the unexpected shift. What had been designed as Booker's spotlight moment, a pointed takedown of a young press secretary, had dramatically reversed. Instead, Leavitt was now in command, dismantling the credibility of his central evidence piece by piece. By the time the chairman called for a recess, the political atmosphere had completely transformed. Reporters swarmed around Leavitt as she exited the chamber, while Booker huddled with his staff, poring over the documents that had derailed the day's narrative. What began as an attempt to discredit a 27-year-old press secretary had quickly spiraled into a potential ethics scandal involving one of the Senate's most high-profile Democrats, all because Leavitt came armed with documentation no one had anticipated. Within hours, the fallout dominated the media landscape. #Leavitt vs. Booker began trending nationwide. Clips of the exchange went viral, racking up millions of views across social platforms. Political commentators across the spectrum scrambled to make sense of the seismic moment. CNN's chief political correspondent, visibly taken aback during a breaking news segment, remarked, What we witnessed today was extraordinary. Senator Booker, typically one of the Democratic Party's most effective communicators, was put on the defensive. And Press Secretary Leavitt didn't just respond, she turned the hearing on its head. Fox News took a more pointed stance. Their headline read, "Booker ambushed, Leavitt reveals evidence of witness coordination." Conservative commentators praised her preparation, precision, and poise under pressure. Even MSNBC, while attempting to reframe the narrative, acknowledged the magnitude of the event. Leavitt's counterplay raises new questions about border data, read their cheerin', though their analysts conceded the communication leaks were politically damaging. The Washington Post quickly published an evening analysis titled The Leavitt Counterpunch, dissecting the moment when a routine oversight hearing transformed into a political reckoning. In the aftermath of a headline-grabbing Senate hearing, analysts from across the political spectrum acknowledged a pivotal shift in how executive branch officials might approach congressional oversight moving forward. Regardless of party affiliation, Karoline Leavitt's performance was recognized as a masterclass in preparation, not only defending administration policy with well-sourced data, but also strategically presenting counter-evidence that flipped the narrative on her interrogators. Social media lit up in response. Conservatives hailed her as a symbol of long-overdue resistance to what they viewed as politically motivated gotcha hearings. Liberals, while critical of her tactics, expressed concern about how such confrontational strategies could alter the balance of power in oversight proceedings. But on both sides, there was broad agreement, something extraordinary had just happened in that Senate chamber. By evening, detailed reviews of the emails and messages Leavitt introduced during the hearing began circulating online. Major fact-checkers quickly authenticated the communications. While debate over context and motive remained fierce, the documents themselves were verified. Senator Booker's office issued a public statement defending their content as routine constituent and oversight work, asserting the communications had been deliberately misrepresented for political purposes. The White House wasted no time capitalizing on the moment. Press releases emphasized Leavitt's composure, policy fluency, and exposure of what they described as political theater disguised as oversight. President Trump himself weighed in via social media, proud of Karoline Leavitt for standing up to Booker's witch hunt with facts. "This is why I picked her." Behind the scenes, Senate Democrats held an emergency caucus meeting. Sources familiar with the discussion revealed a mix of frustration and alarm, particularly that Booker's team had failed to anticipate the possibility of a counterattack. Meanwhile, Republican members of the Senate Ethics Committee began openly discussing the possibility of a formal inquiry into the coordination of testimony introduced by Booker's office. The next day's headlines reflected the fallout. The New York Times, White House press secretary flips script in fiery Senate testimony. The Wall Street Journal, Leavitt-Booker clash raises questions on witness coordination. The Washington Post, oversight or theater? Senate hearing becomes test of process integrity. Leavitt made a composed appearance on Fox and Friends the following morning. Maintaining her calm demeanor, she said, "I went into that hearing prepared to discuss real policy and defend the administration's border security strategy with facts. I also felt it was my responsibility to ensure the American people understood the full context behind the claims being made." When asked whether she had deliberately set a trap for Senator Booker, Leavitt answered diplomatically, "I simply did my homework." In today's political climate, hearings often become more about optics than oversight. "My job was to make sure the truth wasn't lost in the drama." Senator Booker, notably, canceled his scheduled appearance on Meet the Press, citing scheduling conflicts. His office later released a more detailed response, defending its conduct. Senator Booker's staff engaged appropriately with federal employees who raised genuine concerns. Supporting whistleblowers through a complex and often intimidating process is part of Congress's duty, not evidence of coordination. But the political consequences extended well beyond a single exchange. Democratic leaders privately voiced concern that the hearing could set a dangerous precedent. If administration officials began arriving at oversight hearings armed with counterleaks and documentation of coordination efforts, it could threaten the credibility of multiple ongoing investigations. In response, congressional staff training protocols were quickly revised, and legal advisors urged offices to reassess their communication practices. One D.C. political strategist told Politico, "Everyone is scrambling to audit their email trails and text chains with potential witnesses." This wasn't just a moment, it was a warning shot. Leavitt just changed the game. A defining moment in modern political combat. You now have to assume that anything said in private could become tomorrow's front-page headline. That was the consensus echoing through Capitol Hill in the wake of Karoline Leavitt's stunning performance before the Senate Oversight Committee, a hearing that not only altered the trajectory of a political confrontation, but also redefined her public image overnight. Once viewed primarily as a youthful loyalist in the Trump administration, Leavitt emerged from the hearing as a formidable political tactician in her own right. Major media outlets ran profiles exploring her rapid rise, with headlines like "The New Face of White House Combat" capturing the moment. Conservative women, especially younger generations, embraced her as a rising star. Social media lit up with praise from college Republicans and conservative student groups, many of whom began calling her a role model. Speaking invitations to campus events reportedly surged tenfold. Inside the White House, Leavitt's stature shifted significantly. "She's always had the president's trust," a senior advisor told The Hill, "but now she's earned deep respect across the administration. People saw she's not just defending our policies, she's willing and able to go on offense." But beyond the optics and accolades, the most significant impact of Leavitt's appearance may have been its effect on the balance between the executive branch and congressional oversight. 2 weeks later, when she testified before the House Government Reform Committee, a noticeable change in tone had taken place. Democratic members adopted a narrower, more targeted line of questioning, avoiding broad allegations that might trigger another public unraveling of their arguments. Senator Cory Booker, whose exchange with Leavitt had dominated headlines, later addressed the controversy in a speech at Princeton University. While not mentioning her by name, he spoke about the shifting nature of congressional oversight in an era defined by hyperpartisanship. He defended congressional engagement with whistleblowers as essential but admitted that oversight must stay grounded in facts rather than spectacle. The Senate Ethics Committee ultimately chose not to pursue a formal investigation into the matter. Instead, they issued general guidance regarding best practices for interacting with potential witnesses. Political analysts widely viewed the decision as a diplomatic compromise, one that allowed both parties to de-escalate and move forward without further reputational damage. For Leavitt, however, the moment proved to be a career-defining turning point. Reporters at subsequent White House press briefings noted a new level of deference, even among critics. Her mastery of policy, combined with her readiness to push back assertively, had elevated her role well beyond that of a traditional press secretary. 6 months later, her ascent was cemented when she was named to a prominent political magazine's 40 Under 40 list of rising political stars. The profile accompanying the honor captured the transformation succinctly. Before the Senate hearing, Karoline Leavitt was known for her youth and loyalty. After it, she became a symbol of a new political model, one that blends meticulous policy knowledge, relentless preparation, and a fearless willingness to confront opponents head-on. The Leavitt-Booker showdown had quickly become a case study in modern political strategy, taught in campaign boot camps, media training sessions, and political communication courses nationwide. It demonstrated that in an age dominated by carefully managed optics and partisan spectacle, the most powerful move might be to arrive not just prepared to defend, but to launch a counteroffensive armed with hard, unanticipated evidence. For the American public, it offered something rare, a glimpse behind the polished facades of Washington. A raw, unscripted moment that exposed both the vulnerabilities and capabilities of those who hold power, and the high stakes of how that power is wielded in real time. The hearing revealed a fundamental truth about the high-stakes world of American politics: experience, status, and institutional authority can all be upended by one thing: meticulous preparation paired with strategic execution. The exchange between Karoline Leavitt and Senator Cory Booker wasn't just a clash over border data or witness coordination. It became a symbol of a deeper shift in modern political dynamics. In an age where optics often outweigh substance, Leavitt's command of facts and her ability to flip the script underscored how power is increasingly defined by preparation, not tenure. This confrontation served as a powerful reminder: in today's political battlefield, assumptions are dangerous. Even the most seasoned voices can be challenged, successfully, by those who arrive armed with clarity, confidence, and documented truth. Sometimes, the strongest defense is a well-constructed offense. If you found this political showdown as compelling as we did, be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. We'll continue bringing you exclusive breakdowns of the political moments reshaping America's future. Let us know in the comments, which political face-off should we cover next?